Start. Hello, I am Dr. Sriman Narayana, Associate Professor in Surgery. Today, we'll do a case presentation and discuss about it. This is not a theory class. This is something like bedside clinics. Under the circumstances of this COVID, we have to do like this only. Now, the case is about a parotid swelling, but I'll one point by one point we'll discuss. A 47 years old male by name A. Apparao, a resident of Madhurwada and a carpenter by occupation, came with a complaint of swelling on the right side of the face from 1.5 years. This is the identity of the person, and you know the importance of this identity. I think you have, these are fundamentals. Identity is important, age of the person is important, the sex of the person is important. These are all because certain diseases are more common in males. Similarly, certain diseases are more common in certain age groups. And I believe that you all know all these points. Now, coming to the complaint, a swelling on the right side of the face from 1.5 years. Now, about the complaint, he didn't say it is parotid swelling. Complaints are to be recorded in patient's words only. You cannot change them. He may say only right side of the face. He may also say right side of the cheek, right cheek, or he may say below or in front of the right ear also. Whatever he says, we have to record. Now, history of the present illness. That means the details of his complaint. The patient was apparently normal about 1.5 years ago. He developed a swelling on the right side of the face, which is insidious in onset, slowly and uniformly, progressively growing in nature. It's painless. There is no change while eating food and is able to open mouth well. Now, discussing one point by one point, the swelling to start with, there is no specific reason for the swelling to start with. It's an insidious onset. That means there is no specific reason. Some of the swellings develop after some incidents, like a hematoma develops after some injury, or some of the swellings develop after serious illness like typhoid or undergoing major surgery like this. Under these circumstances, parotitis is quite common. Bilateral bacterial parotitis is quite common because of bad oral hygiene in these people who are bedridden. Such precipitating causes are not there, neither injury nor undergoing some major surgery or illness, serious illness like typhoid, which made the person bedridden for quite some time. No such thing is coming forward. Now, the swelling is slowly and uniformly, progressively growing in nature. If a swelling is of 1.5 years duration, you expect it to be acute swelling or chronic swelling? Chronic swelling, very good. There is no borderline between acute and chronic. For majority of the times, 6 to 8 weeks is taken as a vague borderline. But one need not very strictly follow that line. But 1.5 years is quite a long time. So it's a chronic swelling, and it is slowly and progressively uniformly growing. That shows there is no sudden growth or sudden decrease in size. This is important. Such a swelling, which grows slowly and progressively, is mostly a benign disease, benign neoplastic swelling. Whereas a malignant swelling, on the other hand, will suddenly grow rapidly. If a swelling shows during its growth period a sudden reduction in size, suddenly it becomes smaller, then most probably it's a case of inflammatory swelling. Neoplastic swellings, they continuously grow. But neoplastic swellings also rarely, when they lose their blood supply, they become their size becomes less. Then the swelling is painless. That obviously shows it's not an inflammatory swelling. Chronic inflammatory swellings may be very less painful or almost painless. Similarly, neoplastic malignant swellings may become painful, particularly when they suddenly increase in their size. Maybe bleeding occurs into the swelling, or when it invades surrounding tissues which have sensitive nerves, then they become painful. So in this case, it is a painless swelling. It's very likely a chronic inflammatory or benign neoplastic. There is no change while eating food. That means gustatory reflexes are not involved. Normally, a salivary gland produces saliva and secretes it during eating food. Even just thinking of food itself produces salivary secretion. Under these circumstances, the swelling increases in size and sometimes may become painful also. Such changes are not occurring in the present case. Lastly, the person is able to open his mouth well. That means his jaw movements are not restricted. The temporomandibular joint is not involved, nor the muscles that are acting, muscles of mastication, are not involved, nor are they irritated. ఇది మళ్ళా past history. No history of similar complaints in the past. That means this is not a recurrent disease. Some of the cases where recurrences are common in case of parotid are commonly inflammatory swellings, where a stone in the duct will produce on and off swellings. Similarly, on and off infections are also common. Inflammatory swellings are not there. No significant medical or surgical history. Again, surgical history says that means if previous swelling is there and it has undergone surgery, excision, and again a recurrence of the swelling indicates it can be a malignant disease. If the previous swelling was not completely excised, only local excision was done in the previous or first operation, recurrence is known. Recurrence are quite common with malignant diseases. Even with benign diseases, if removal is incomplete, then also it's possible. Particularly pleomorphic adenoma or mixed parotid tumor, these recurrences are quite common. There's no history of significant diseases like tuberculosis, asthma, epilepsy, or etc. Some of the diseases run in families. Therefore, family history is usually taken. In this case, it is nil significant. Personal history, apart from comorbidities, it is the habit of gutka chewing is there. That's important because parotid swellings are quite common with associated with bad oral hygiene. And most of them are recurrent inflammatory swellings. General examination. Of course, there is nothing specific. Important points are, is there any lymphadenopathy that is to be noted? Or sometimes if trismus is there, he won't be able to open his mouth or move his mouth well. That also may be noted. Sometimes in general examination, both sides of the parotids are swollen or not. One side may be dominant, the other side may be less dominant. Such things can be noted down. Now, coming to the local examination, the position of the patient is he sits on a stool comfortably. The examiner will stand by the side of the patient while examining, or even he may sit beside him and examine him. Inspection. A single swelling on the right side of the cheek, just in front and below the lobule of the ear. The site of the swelling is important in this. The complaint was only on the side of the face, but anywhere on the side of the face. But now on inspection, we noticed that the swelling was in front and below the lobule of the ear. It is the oval in shape, size is 3 into 4 centimeters. These are to be noted down because when he visits next time, if there is any progress of the growth of the swelling, that can be recognized immediately. Surface of the swelling is smooth, margins are well defined. The skin over the swelling is normal without any scars or sinuses or any engorged veins or visible pulsations. The importance is that if he has undergone previous surgery, a scar will be there. Along with surgery, sometimes a salivary fistula or a sinus may develop. Engorged veins or visible pulsations indicate a hemangioma or a hemangioma or very vascular tumor. See, the photo shows on one side very much enlarged prostate, on the other side less prominent prostate. Palpation. To start with palpation, two important signs are to be noted. That is local rise of temperature and tenderness of the swelling. These two are important clinical signs that are to be noted in the beginning itself. One is the temperature in the local area as you go on palpating may change later on. Therefore, the original rise in temperature to be recognized in the first itself. That is with the back of your fingers, you will note down and compare with either opposite side or on the normal skin a little away from the local area. It's to be compared. Then tenderness, if it is swelling is very tender and painful, we should not cause discomfort to the patient by go on palpating it and pressing it. We should be very gentle under the circumstances. We have to limit our examination. Then all the inspectory findings like the site, shape, size are noted down again, confirmed. The surface is felt as not very smooth and uniform. There is mild bossing on palpation. That means it is a little undular. Margins are not very regular, again irregular. It's firm in consistency. When you examine or noting down the consistency, you have to say whether it is uniformly firm all over the swelling. Variability in consistency can exist sometimes, and majority of such times it is a malignant tumor. Even in acute inflammatory swellings, The central portion will be soft because there is an abscess formation, whereas at the periphery, it is quite firm. So when you are examining for consistency, you have to say whether it's uniform consistency all over the swelling or not. Then the skin over the swelling is pinchable. That means it has no attachment to the skin. The swelling has no attachment to the skin, nor is it a swelling arising from the skin. The skin is easily movable as well as pinchable. The swelling is mobile in all directions. Mobility of the swelling is next tested, and it is tested in at least two right-angled directions minimum. In this case, it is mobile in all directions. Again, deeper swellings, their mobility is a little less than superficial swellings. Then on contracting the underneath muscle, the masseter, by clenching the teeth, is there any restriction of mobility of the swelling or not? We have to see. So that shows the swelling, has it any attachment to the underlying muscle or not. If the swelling has attachment or invasion of the muscles, then as the muscle becomes tight, the mobility also gets restricted, at least in one direction. And also, as underlying muscle is becoming tight, the swelling becomes a little prominent also. That shows the swelling is lying on this muscle or above the level of muscle, not below the level of muscle. Swami? పిల్లలకి నేను కనిపించాను మాట్లాడడం కనపడదు కానీ మాట వినొచ్చు కదా. With history itself, we can come to some understanding. In this case, history shows it's of long duration, slowly and progressively going. There is no specific incidence to start or precipitate the swelling. These are all pointing to what type of swelling it is. How swellings are classified? They are classified into congenital swellings, post-traumatic swellings, inflammatory swellings, neoplastic swellings, and mixed and miscellaneous swellings. So it cannot be a congenital swelling because he's 47 years old, and congenital swellings are mostly present in the early neonatal period. No such thing here. Could it be a post-traumatic swelling? There is no history of trauma preceding the appearance of swelling. Then, could it be an inflammatory swelling? Acute inflammatory signs and symptoms are not there. It's not painful at least. Therefore, it couldn't be acute inflammatory swelling. But chronic inflammation cannot be ruled out by history itself. But if recurrences are there, recurrent swelling is there, we can imagine that it's probably a chronic inflammatory swelling. But a swelling that slowly and progressively uniformly is go on increasing in size, very likely a benign neoplastic swelling. On the other hand, a malignant swelling starts growing quite faster. See, acute inflammatory swellings, the duration we say in days, whereas in case of malignant swelling, it is weeks. Whereas in benign swellings, it's in months or years. Just for comparison's sake. Parotid swelling can పోయిందా ఏంటి అది లేడా లేకపోతే కుమార్ని పిలవండి కుమార్ చెప్పలేదు
ఇదే సార్ స్క్రీన్ చేయాలా షేర్
ప్రెజెంటేషన్
అవును
రాలేదు ప్రెజెంటేషన్ మరి నిన్న కాపీ చేశాడు గిరీష్
ముందు లేదా సార్ బయట నుంచి లేదా బయట డెస్క్టాప్ మీద లేదా అదే ఇదే కదా సార్
అదే వస్తుంది కదా
ఇంక వస్తుంది సార్ ఇది ఆటోమేటిక్ అవుతుంది అది క్లోజ్ అవుతుంది సార్
ఓకే
రికార్డింగ్ ఇందాక ఫాదర్ కార్డ్లో ఫిక్స్
So during palpation, the main points are whether there is a local rise in temperature and tenderness of the swelling, ముందుకెళ్ళిపోతాం నాయన నేను వెనక్కి ఒక్కొక్క పాయింట్ చెప్తాను. అదే on palpation, it is local rise of temperature and then tenderness, and the surface of the swelling shows mild bossing. The margins are also a little irregular, uniformly firm in consistency, and it's apparently between underneath the muscle and the skin. See, this is how it is tested. The palpation for local rise of temperature and consistency, and as he clenches the second figure shows, he clenches the teeth to tighten the master muscle, wherein the swelling becomes a little more prominent and its mobility, if not attached to the muscle, is not restricted. Then comes oral examination. The parotid duct or the Stenson's duct opens onto a papilla at the level of second molar, second molar tooth. So the papilla intraorally is examined, is asked to open the mouth, and with a spatula, the cheek is, with a spatula, the cheek is turned aside and papilla is exposed at the level of second molar tooth, upper second molar tooth. Normally, papilla is seen very inconspicuously as a small elevation. There may be a little minor micro depression. That much only we can see. There may be a little wetness normally. But when there is some disease, changes may occur. If it is inflammatory disease like a chronic parotitis, the papilla becomes edematous and redness also will exist. And there may be slight purulent discharge. Particularly if you press the parotid gland at the same time while examining the opening, the contents may gush out through the opening. If it is inflammatory swelling like parotitis, purulent discharge. Normally it is saliva which is totally colorless, watery. In this case, there is no redness or swelling of the papilla. Salivary output is normal in color. Then bidigital examination. In the mouth, a gloved index finger is placed and externally thumb is placed. By clenching the teeth, the master muscle is tightened, which the anterior border of the master muscle can easily be palpated. As you slowly palpate the anterior border of the master muscle, you can roll down or feel the parotid duct. So the parotid duct, once identified by the thumb outside, at the same time inside also behind the papilla, the index finger is placed. Between them, the parotid duct is palpated for any thickness or hardness. If stone is present, such a thing as felt as hardness. Then bimanual examination for deep lobe of the parotid. Parotid has two lobes, a superficial lobe and deep lobe. The deep lobe is not well seen, nor is it palpated outside. For its palpation, a bimanual examination intraorally is necessary. Intraorally, the fingers are placed behind the third molar tooth in front of the tonsil. In the retromolar area, it's to be palpated. At the same time, the other hand palpates behind the angle of the mandible, retromandibular area and retromolar area. With these two hence the deep lobe is palpated. See, in the first picture, it is bidigital examination for the parotid duct. And in the second picture, it is the manual examination for deep lobe. So in this picture, I'm trying to show you where the Stenson's duct opens and how it should be inspected. Now, jaw movements are examined, asking the patient to open and close the mouth once or twice. Second, the other areas like other lymph nodal areas are noted down, particularly in the jugulo-digastric area below the parotid region, as well as in the submandibular areas are to be examined. Opposite parotid also is examined for any swelling. Some of the swellings are bilateral in nature. One side may dominate, particularly acute parotitis in mumps. Similarly, autoimmune diseases like Sjogren's disease or certain of the swellings, neoplastic swellings like Warthin's tumor, they are bilateral. Lastly, within the gland, most important structure that passes through is the facial nerve. So whether facial nerve is involved or not, whether it's paralyzed or not, we can see by asking the patient to show his teeth. On the paralyzed side, the face becomes hypotonic and it is pulled to the opposite side. At the same time, the eyelids on the same side do not move and the eyes are not closed on the same side. It is a kind of a lower motor neuron lesion in case of facial palsy. What is your conclusion? The conclusion I show is it's a benign neoplastic swelling involving the right parotid gland. Now, point by point, why is it a parotid gland that's involved? Because of its position. The swelling is in front as well as below the ear lobule. Second, why is it a benign neoplastic? Because the history shows it's a chronic disease and slowly and progressively growing totally painless disease. And also it has no involvement of either structures above or superficial like skin or underneath like masseter or inside at least the facial nerve is not involved. So it is a benign neoplastic swelling only. Differential diagnosis, of course, it has to be differentiated from malignant swelling, wherein the history is much shorter. It will be a case of 2-3 months only. Second, it may be a little painful. Lastly, it may show invasion in one of the structures like skin or at least facial nerve or the masseter muscle. Lastly, on palpation, it is totally irregular as well as it is very hard in nature. Sometimes variation in consistency is also possible. Under the differential diagnosis, malignant tumors are to be ruled out. Then skin swellings like a sebaceous cyst is also a possibility. But punctum is not there. Skin is well mobile and pinchable all over the surface of the swelling. Could it be a subcutaneous swelling like a lipoma? It's quite possible. But mobility of the subcutaneous swellings is much more than parotid swellings. because parotid gland is covered by a dense, tough parotid fascia. Then lymph nodes. Cervical lymph nodes are quite possible. They are also present in front of the ear lobule as well as below it also. But if multiple swellings are present, then we go in favor of lymph nodes. A bony swelling arising from the mandible, it's unlikely because it's not bony in consistency, hard in consistency, and it's not, it is not fixed to the bone underneath. The swelling is quite mobile over the bone. So thinking it's a case of benign neoplastic swelling from the right parotid gland, what should we do next? Nana? We investigate. What investigations? One is a plain X-ray of the area. Plain X-ray of the side of the face, because in chronic inflammatory diseases, particularly if a stone is present in the duct or in the gland itself, that may be seen as a calcified area. Parotid calculi are less common, and majority of them are radiolucent, whereas submandibular gland calculi are quite common and they are radio opaque. Second investigation is ultrasound scan. This is because its ultrasound scan is a simpler examination, present or available in every center, and it's quite harmless. This shows where the swelling is. Approximately shows the plane of the swelling as well as the consistency of the swelling, like it's liquid content or solid content, very hard in a very densely placed swelling. These points can be determined by ultrasound scan. Lastly, CT scan and MRI scan clearly show the borders of the parotid gland. In two, CT scan shows in 2 dimensions, whereas MRI scan can give 3-dimensional view in all the 3-dimensional cuts. So clearly the parotid gland, its borders are seen. The swelling within the gland can also be noticed. Whether it's cystic or not can also be noticed. Its variation in its density with the surrounding parotid gland is noted. And MRI scan also shows whether its vascularity, highly vascular or not, also shown. By these details, we can determine the exact site of the swelling in the parotid gland and also its nature, whether it's invading the surrounding tissues or not. And then xylogram. This is an invasive test. Through the papilla, we pass a microtubule, plastic tube, through which we inject a radio opaque dye like lipiodol, and X-rays are immediately taken. This shows the ductal system, both extraglandular and to some extent intraglandular ductal system is noted down. And these ducts, in case of any stricture, narrowed area is shown. In case of a fistula, the leak of the dye can be shown. If there is a radiolucent stone, a vacant area, gap can be shown. At the same time, there is a neoplasm, the intraductal, intraglandular ducts, they deviate and bend, allowing the swelling to be placed between the intraglandular tubules. And lastly, FNAC, fine needle aspiration cytology. If necessary, under ultrasound guidance can be done to rule out whether it is a case of malignancy or not. After the investigations are over, we should come to a definite diagnosis or the final diagnosis. What is the final diagnosis in this case? It's probably a pleomorphic adenoma or mixed tumor of the right parotid gland. After histological or cytological examination, it's confirmed that it's pleomorphic adenoma or mixed parotid tumor. Then what do? We advise them surgical removal of the swelling. In case of parotid, simple removal of the swelling is not always helpful, particularly with mixed parotid tumor, because this mixed parotid tumor, though is capsulated, here and there the capsule may not be well formed, and small extensions of the swelling like pseudopods may extend into the surrounding areas. So if we try to remove only the swelling, enucleation of the swelling, we may leave some of the pseudopods, which may grow later on. So recurrence of the swelling is possible. So in all probability, we advise superficial parotidectomy. The superficial lobe of the parotid gland has to be completely excised. Now, superficial parotidectomy. Parotid has a deep lobe and a superficial lobe. And what lies between them? Can you answer? Chart. Chart. Yes. Somebody answered facial nerve. That's absolutely correct. Facial nerve with its 5 branches separates the facial superficial lobe from deep lobe. There is what is called facio-venous plane that divides. Vein is also just under the facial nerve branches. The common facial vein also runs there only. See in the pictures, facio-venous plane is shown. Superficial parotidectomy, the incision is given from in front of the ear in a vertical line, and that curves around the ear lobule up to the tip of the mastoid process. From there, it goes down again along the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid to variable extent depending on the size of the swelling, to about 4 centimeters or 5 centimeters. From there, the flaps of skin are raised. The parotid gland is dissected from the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, and slowly it's turned to front side. And as you separate from the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, one notices the trunk of the facial nerve. This is most important. If you catch hold of the trunk of the facial nerve, slowly the gland in front of it is separated from the nerve without injuring it. The veins are lying underneath the facial nerve. Now, prognosis of the disease. If you do superficial parotidectomy, what complications can arise? 2-3 complications are quite common. One is Of course, local infection is possible. A hematoma or seroma is another possibility. Therefore, after surgery, we always keep a drain. Lastly, a salivary fistula is possible because the deep lobe continues to secrete saliva. But this is usually lasts only a few days because the duct system is intact. Lastly, as the superficial lobe is dissected from the branches of the facial nerve, the facial nerve branches are subjected to some stretch. Therefore, facial palsy is seen commonly, and very commonly it is only a temporary. It's of temporary nature. Permanent loss of permanent facial palsy is also possible in some cases. If facial nerve is divided accidentally, then it can be reconstructed again by using nerve grafts. In case of malignant tumors only, particularly if they are invading the facial nerve branches, those branches are sacrificed. Lastly, a peculiar complication, and examination wise it's important, that is Fraze syndrome, auriculotemporal syndrome it's also called. In this, what happens is in the post-operative period, after a few weeks or months, as the person eats food, he develops sweating and burning sensation of the parotid area and a little bit of surrounding cheek also. This is because while eating, the parotid gland is supposed to secrete saliva, but these secretory nerve endings, which are parasympathetic, they develop connections with sweat glands, which are raised along with a flap while doing the surgery. So these sweat glands are now innervated by salivary secreting parasympathetic nerve endings. So while eating, the sweat glands in this area are stimulated, producing sweat. At the same time, the microvasculature also is stimulated and dilated, therefore burning sensation may be present. Sometimes hyperesthesia itself is also present, particularly noticed while shaving. And this auriculotemporal syndrome is of variable intensity. Mild cases are quite common, but they are mostly unnoticed or ignored by the patient. Only serious cases are recognized and documented. And now, is there any way to prevent the occurrence of this complication? Yes, there is. We can prevent connections between parasympathetic nerve endings with the sweat gland nerve endings by interposing some tissue. A sternocleidomastoid muscle flap can be placed over the facial nerve, or temporalis muscle flap can be placed, or even artificial membranes can also be placed between them over the operated area of the parotid gland, over which the skin is sutured, thereby preventing wrong connections between parasympathetic nerve endings and the sweat gland nerve endings. Suppose in a case where Fraze syndrome is quite serious and disturbing, then the best treatment is botulinum toxin injection to the local area. That paralyzes the nerves. And lastly, recurrence of swelling, particularly in case of mixed parotid tumor, it's about 2% after 10 years. Only point is recurrence of swelling means we always take we always take the possibility of malignancy. We consider it could be malignant because it recurred. Second time doing surgery is difficult to save the facial nerve. We may very likely injure this facial nerve while doing second time surgery in the parotid area. Okay, right. Thank you very much for your patient listening to the class. And